What's up, party people? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. I've got another amazing guest. I kind of still can't believe that I get to speak to all these really cool people. My next guest is Roy Krishnan. He's the founder and CEO of Liquid Sports Lab, a performance science company in Rochester, New York, that turns biomechanical captured data into decisions athletes and coaches can act on. He came to the work as a competitor first. The work got noticed quickly. Mark Cuban's Dallas Mavericks brought him into player development analytics in 2021, and the Toronto Raptors, believe it or not, promoted him in 2022, where he became the youngest person to hold his position in league history. Today, we're going to talk about Liquid Sports Lab. They analyze sports mechanics and injury prevention. He was telling me they recently got into hockey. I'm really excited to talk to him about this through image capture, examining variables like elbow flexion, shoulder abduction, and hip shoulder separation, and converts them into visuals that show athletes the physics behind both success and injury. Krishnan calls the method the 4 C's: collect, compare, correct, compete. Roy, how are you today?
I'm good, Sonny. Thanks so much for having me on. Really excited to be here today.
Yeah, likewise. Happy to have you here. So where in the world are you right now?
Yeah, right now I'm home at Rochester, New York. Just got out of the lab, actually. Spent a couple hours there, and yeah, really excited that I get to be on here and end my day, my work day, over here with you.
Cool, man. No, likewise. Ever since I talked to you, I think it was a week ago or so, I've been thinking about what we talked about. It's such a fascinating story you have. Can you maybe let's just dive into the deep end. What is what is it? What is Liquid Sports Lab? Why does the world need it? And we'll keep it kind of like high level for now, but we're obviously going to go deeper into it later on.
Yeah. Liquid Sports Lab is a sports performance facility at its core that runs on data analytics instead of like your conventional kind of meathead lifters that are coming in there and saying, "Hey, this is what we're gonna do and this is how we're gonna do it." It's basically a way to be able to get better at whatever your sport is. It using like mathematical facets to actually do it. So athletes are coming in every single day and they're testing before they do anything else. Getting them on force plate measures, getting them on central nervous system fatigue measures. Basically, taking a snapshot in time, seeing how stressed the athlete is in terms of like physical fitness, how ready they are to undertake that day's activities, and also making like informed decisions where it's like if there's something keeping you from getting to the level that you want to be, instead of just saying, hey, this is the reason you're not there, kind of taking like a regimented mathematical plan for like what are the steps we can undertake through like proven principles of science that can actually help get you there. So yeah, we're a sports tech facility that are building careers and keeping people safe with math, physics, and biomechanics.
Wow, that's super interesting. That's super interesting. I mean, obviously, the work you're doing is with like athletes at the edge of their human performance, but I assume a lot of the science maybe further down the line would be applicable to the average guy who's, I don't know, lifting weights and just trying to stay fit as well, or do you not think that far ahead?
No, I totally, that's exactly kind of where you want to be. I mean, not only from like a, market share perspective, which is all what all founders to think about, but
Right,
also
right.
like we believe like everybody's an athlete. I mean, if you just look at kind of like social dynamics, there are more people running marathons and less people drinking nowadays, and that's just how it is. And
Right.
that's a
Good
good
point.
welcome change. And so, yeah, we want to be able to eventually help everyone, help your aspiring marathoner, help your mom do more gardening, that she could be outside for longer. But in terms of collecting data, being 4 or 5 years old now, we primarily work with professional and college athletes right now.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. So you just to kind of like take it back a little bit, right? So you pitched at Dartmouth and then at the university, or I guess you didn't pitch there, right? What was the story? You got there, and then when you were competing, what did I guess my deeper question is, what did the feedback look loop actually look like for an athlete, trying to get better, and where did it kind of break down?
Yeah, and so for me, my story, and that's the reason why I kind of started Liquid Sports Lab is I was a high school pitcher. I was pretty good. I grew up in Oakville, Ontario, Canada. Had was told from a pretty young age, like, you're really really good at this, and you should probably go to the United States to pursue this and kind of see where you rank. And so I was very fortunate. I got to move to Scarsdale, New York, for high school. Played high school baseball there. I wouldn't say I was great. I was good. I had a couple of like Division 1 offers. Most of them were like high academic Division 1. So this is back in the days when try to balance being a student and an athlete. So I ended up verbally committing to Dartmouth University, and I was all set to go. I was all ready to go. It was kind of like a preferred walk on for them, where I was going to show up and compete. And unfortunately, I got a scar here that reminds me every day. I had Tommy John surgery. And at that time, this is 2016, this was a little bit more of a death sentence than it is today. Today, there's a lot more technology in place, and the recovery rate is a lot better. But yeah, I committed and kind of like engineered my whole life, if you will, to like show up on campus in the fall. And fortunately, when I got hurt, I had no longer had an opportunity to do that. And I got really lucky. I got really lucky that then after that, the University of Rochester contacted me and said, "Hey, we'll take you hurt and all, and you can come back and recover here and play here, and come have a career here." And so, yeah, I was able to go to the University of Rochester, spend some time on the baseball team there, and after which it got me asking, because when I was coming back from the injury, I asked a lot of questions. I was an engineering student. That's kind of the name of the game. And I asked my physical therapist and I asked my doctors, and I said, why do we do things the way we do when coming back from surgery? Like, why aren't we measuring stress? Why aren't we measuring like mechanical integrity? At the end of the day, like, a human being is a system, and the system's failed. That's what injury is, right? There's some pain point, the system's failed. And the answer I got uh, there's no reason. It just, the protocol that was written in the 1970s, when Dr. James Andrews and Dr. Frank Jobe were kind of the pioneers behind Tommy John surgery. And for myself, it was kind of like, the world has come a long way since the 1970s, especially in like the clinical application of data. And so it kind of just woke me up to, like, I was like, no one is really collecting data around why people get hurt. And it's just accepted that this happens. Your favorite football player plants hard and he's just out for 18 months. He tears his ACL. Your favorite pitcher gets on the mound, he throws hard, and you just accepted, oh, he's getting Tommy John surgery. He's out for 16 months. And so I wanted to be kind of one of the people that found out why. Why does this happen? And in kind of finding that why, I was really lucky. My junior year in college, the University of Rochester, was able to get some pre-seed money together, and I had some really good people in the city of Rochester here that said, okay, we're going to come together, we're going to give you some money, and we're going to try and figure out what this problem is. And so, yeah, November 2020 was the day, or November 1st, 2020 was the incorporation date of when I started Liquid Sports Lab. And now, we're in 2026 and we're still going, which never in a million years could I imagine that we'd still be doing what we get to do today. But that's essentially the story of kind of how we came to be and why we came to be. It's a problem I had myself, and just asked more and more questions and got to solve some along the way. And now we continue to deepen and deepen our understanding for why people get hurt, and why joints fail at specific thresholds.
That's so fascinating. So, I guess before Liquid Sports Lab, what was before Liquid Sports Lab was a company? What was like? What were you actually building? Like spreadsheets, capture rigs, code, something else? Like, what were you guys up to?
Yeah, so I mean, before it was a company, it was me buying like inertial movement units, IMUs from like Norway, and kind of like strapping them down, like strapping into my own arm, and just trying to figure out, like, hey, what does this even look like? So you learn the hard way. Sometimes sampling rate's not high enough for overhead athletes, like the data is just not accurate, things like that. And yeah, before that, it was just me trying these methods on myself to see if anything was really there. And I had, a decent amount of success in terms of, like, trying these methods on myself. And then I got to work with some really, really cool companies. I got to go work over at Driveline Baseball. They're kind of a pioneer in the baseball performance science space. I got to go work, obviously with the Dallas Mavericks and the Toronto Raptors. And basically everyone was trying to answer the central question of like load management, right? Like how do we keep our high level athletes healthy? And how do we get our non-high level athletes to that high level and keep them healthy during the whole process? So as I kind of went down the rabbit hole more and more, worked with a lot of cool and smart people, I realized this was kind of the central theme. And the only way to really understand that, if you will, is to spend all your time studying it. Where kind of some other places that I'd work, it was kind of like a complement to the research. At Liquid Sports Hub, it's our main cause. Our main cause is how do we get guys better, and then how do we keep them healthy? That's our elevator pitch, if you will, is reserved to those two things.
You brought up the Toronto Raptors thing, right? So you were the youngest to hold your position in league history when you moved to the Toronto Raptors. What did that seat let you see about how elite teams actually make decisions on athlete health?
Well, I think it showed me that there's a spectrum, and I think that's the beauty of learning from like in different ecosystems. Like I went from the Dallas. So I'll talk about kind of like the Dallas Mavericks first. So I owe Dallas a lot because I was 22. I was 21 at the time, and we were publishing all this research online. And honestly, just like it was mostly Twitter. We're saying, hey, we ran this study, we found this, we just put it out there on Twitter, and we said, if you have any questions, let us know. But we were measuring things that people really hadn't measured before, but maybe had considered. And so, yeah, one day I got a call from the Dallas Mavericks, and they said, hey, we think you're doing something really, really cool, and we'd love to bring you in for an interview. And I ended up flying down to Dallas, and 6 interviews later, I got hired, and that was a super cool feeling. I mean, at that time, now they're owned by the Adelson family, but at that time, the Mavericks were owned by none other than Mark Cuban. So as a startup entrepreneur, right, who doesn't love the team that's owned by one of the most famous entrepreneurs of the early 2000s and the guy that's on Shark Tank, these days. So yeah, I got to work for the Mavericks for a year and a half. We went to Western Conference Finals. It was I learned a lot, and that was more like a family-run organization. And what I mean by that is Mark Cuban is awesome because he doesn't really care about turning a profit with the Mavericks. It's his passion. So he's going to do whatever it takes to win. And it was a really successful year for us, and I'm really grateful for my time there. And then, yeah, a year and a half later, like you said, I went to the Toronto Raptors, and that is very much a company. That is owned by Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment. At the time, Rogers hadn't bought any, or maybe they had a small stake, but they hadn't bought out the entire enterprise. And so it was a lot more, the decision-making was a lot more rooted in kind of like an analytical ecosystem, like an analytical backend, where with the Mavericks, I think it was a lot of power concentrated in a few small hands, and the Raptors have a kind of a much larger breadth, just because of all the organizations that MLSE owns. So in terms of like what did I learn? I learned a lot. I learned mostly that you have to be able to have a large data set to make these macro decisions. And one of the beauties of MLSE, and there's a lot of drawbacks as well. I know there's a lot of Canadian fans watching right now. But one of the beauties is when you own Toronto FC, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Toronto Raptors, Raptors Uprising, all the Toronto Argonauts, last but not least, you have all these different avenues of what performance looks like. So you have all these different avenues to kind of go in and measure and say, like, what does success look like in these fields? And is there anything that holds true, like unilaterally across every single division? And so that was a really cool part, I'd say, of my time in Toronto, is being able to interact with a lot of smart people that are domain experts in their respective sports, but B, having this like global ecosystem where all these different teams, from esports to basketball to hockey both at a professional level and at the AHL level, to MLS soccer, to CFL football, had these varying degrees of analytical success. And being able to kind of learn from each of those pillars, I think, is something very unique to MLSE that isn't really that prevalent in the United States. The United States is mostly like one organization owns one team.
That's so fascinating. So, 3.5 years across the Mavericks and the Raptors, and then you went back full time to your own company. So I guess what was the through line that made that the obvious next move rather than a risk?
Yeah,
Hey, by the way,
I
Roy,
think.
before you talk, do you mind if I take a bite of my pizza? My wife just gave me a
Oh, of
plate.
course. Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think ARR, from a founder perspective, always tells kind of the story in terms of like, is there like A, is there product market fit? Yes. But B, like, how much of a risk am I taking by going full time in my company? Right. And so the Mavericks, I mean, when I started this in college, maybe we lost $10,000 my first year doing this, and then my second year we made a little bit more money, probably made 20,000. This is ARR, so we're not talking about profit here. Then my third year maybe was like 40,000. And then kind of my last year in Toronto, we had eclipsed that like $150,000 ARR mark, where I was like, okay, like I am doing this part time essentially, and I'm working a very strenuous full time job on the data science, performance science, and analytical side of professional sports franchises. Imagine how big this could be if I spent 40 hours a week kind of thinking about it. And so, I was 25 at that time. And I think it was also so important to kind of go learn from other ecosystems, because you need to see what good and bad looks like. I think there's a lot of founders nowadays. The founder age is getting younger and younger and younger. And that's great, because at the end of the day, like, who better to solve problems than people that don't have to worry about like a wife and kids, where they can just spend all their time thinking about these problems. But you also need to go see like, how does the application work in the real world? So yeah, 3 years there, and then yeah, when we got past that 125,000 ARR mark, was kind of when I was like, all right, like this is no longer a blip. This is like, we're getting to six figures of annual revenue, and we're not really. I wouldn't say we weren't working that hard. We were definitely working hard, but we weren't devoting 40 to 60 to 70 hours a week doing this. And so yeah, I would say after, that kind of made the decision easy. Having seen like what else goes on in the world, and that like, so you have perspective. That's like A. B, yeah, getting past that 100,000 ARR mark. There's no real number. It's just like proof of concept was there. And then C, like still being young enough where I was like, okay, if I'm ever going to take, there's always a risk when you own your own company, right? And if I'm ever going to take that risk, now is the time. I've seen enough of the world and how the world operates. I have that proof of concept kind of distilled down where I know people are appreciating it and consuming it. And then I'm still young enough where like I'm not providing for others, where the risk tolerance is still pretty high. I'd say those A, B, and C are the reasons that it made it pretty evident to me it was time to do this full time.
And was there like a specific catcher or a specific athlete or a specific number where you realized that this was a real company and not like a side project? Or was it more just like that cash flow kind of ARR analysis that you were doing in your head?
I think it was. I mean, it was a little bit of both. I think the world got more progressive, where when you look at an MLB telecast nowadays, you see things like spin rates and vertical break and horizontal break and landing angle and all these things. Like people don't even talk about batting average anymore. They talk about OPS plus, and all these things we were doing 8 years ago when we first started, like when this was first like a concept in our minds, have now become commonplace. They've become everyday jargon. And seeing kind of the world make that switch, where I turn on the TV and watch a baseball game, and they are talking in analytical terms like 10x what they used to, back in the day. I think that was a big catalyst in doing so. And then yeah, I think obviously yeah, having a six-figure ARR, it definitely, when you really think about it, because these I call it night decisions, right? You get off of work at 7 p.m. and you sit in the apartment and you were like, I think there's something here, and then you almost have to like convince yourself, like you're an outside consumer, um, like outside of the bias that you have, your preconceived notions of bias. How do I know there's something here? Well, look, there's six figures of ARR. People are talking about the vernacular has changed completely, where it's a lot more analytical. If there's ever a time to do it, it's now. Um, and so yeah, I think yeah, those are the two pillars. It's just ARR is always good, just because it's explaining it to yourself. But if you were to explain it to an investor, for example, or a bank, that always helps. And then yeah, just kind of seeing this like paradigm shift and analytical acceptance was definitely important as well.
You say the 4 C's are collect, compare, correct, compete. So which of those four is the one everyone underestimates?
The one that everyone underestimates is compete. And it's funny saying that as an analytics guy. And the reason is like the real world does not work in a lab. And I love to use this analogy just because I think it's a great story for all my chess players out there, right? Deep Blue beat Gary Kasparov in the late 1900s, and everyone said, "Oh my God, everyone is now going to watch these AI engines play each other." And it turns out nobody does that because people love to watch humans compete. That's what the name of the game is. It's this like romantic and somewhat cynic, like like modern day gladiator battle between your team and the other, between good and evil, right? And so compete is always the biggest threshold. Like this is not a PhD setting where research matters so much as the applied sense, right? You can collect all this data in the world. I can have a guy in my lab that throws 105 miles an hour, knows exactly where it's going. He does not get paid unless he can do that on the baseball field with 100,000 people watching him, with all the pressure in the world, with the background, like the background implications being, I'll use the Blue Jays for example. If you give up a hit here, you let a country down, right? That is the applied sense of this stuff. What we're doing is we're basically counting cards at the casino. We're trying to stack the odds in their favor. And so, yeah, we can stack the odds in the favor all you want, but even if you go count cards at the casino, you still only have like a 52% edge on the house. That 48% kicker can still take you out. And so that's why compete is the most important part because you can design all these systems, you can find all this alpha, you can create all this like goodness, if you will, all this ability in the lab. But unless you can find something, or the player can find a mindset, for example, to translate it over to the field, it's just a number. It's like a grandpa telling a story. Like you're reading words off a page. Can you tell a good story? That's not just words off a page. That's the person doing the translation. That is the one that's is really doing the work.
And you spent roughly, I guess, like 5 years collecting, data, right, and refining the product before you leaned into kind of the AI side of it. I guess in an era, where everyone rushes to the model, like, why did you take that slower path?
Yeah, I think we took a slower path for one reason. It's just like AI wasn't a buzzword back then. Like we've been very, very lucky that data has become gold in 2026. But for us, like, and I joke with people, like I joke nowadays that like everything's AI, right? Like linear regression is AI. All these types of things are now like AI, ML. For us, it was a math problem. It was an optimization problem. And we started saying, okay, nobody has any idea how this happens. There's no like specific path to go down. The only way we're going to really learn is by collecting everything over a long period of time and then going in and looking at the insights. And so why it took us 5 years specifically is in 2020, that way less people kind of believed in this style of thinking than in 2025. And so in 2020, maybe we had 30 athletes in, which I mean, by the central limit theorem is technically sufficient, but we know it's not how it works in the real world. So we had maybe 30 athletes in 2020, and then that doubled in 2021, and then that tripled in 2022. And so I would say we didn't get to that 1,000-person sample for 4 years. And also, I mean, it helped that we weren't in this rush to go to market because I was still working the NBA. Some of the guys that we have hired now, we're still working with Team USA. So we weren't really in this rush to go to market. It wasn't a business problem for us. This is like something we loved doing. The answers for us were less about monetization and more about like actually finding the answer.
You told us that like one of the most kind of counterintuitive things you've learned recently is that sleep is extremely important in the macro. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So in this like era of high performance, right, where you're seeing like all these different training apps, right? You go on Instagram and you see Pliability, and you see Whoop, and you see Aura, and you see a trail runner. And you see all these different apps that are meant to like handle load without actually collecting, I guess, like regimented data. So we'll have athletes come in and they'll say, oh, my strain score today for my whoop. I didn't sleep well last night. My whoop says my HRV was quite low. Heart rate variance was quite low. And I don't think I'm going to have a good day. And they come in and they have a great day and they blow out of the water and they go, well, I can't believe I had a great day. My whoop said I wasn't going to have one. And again, we get back to the 4 C's, right? And the fourth one being compete. It is really important to get sleep long term. It is the almost like the software update that your body needs nightly to be able to like stay regimented, stay focused, to do all these things. And so you should, in the macro view of the world, it is extremely, extremely, extremely important for all you athletes out there, for all you businessmen out there, for anybody that uses their brain on an everyday basis. But in the short term, if you don't sleep one night, it isn't going to manifest right away. You still have like adrenal glands and cortisol and adrenaline and things going that can get you through that singular day. And so again, it is super important to strive for it on an everyday basis. But just because you didn't have it for one day, it does not rob you of your ability to compete. You can still go out there and have a unbelievably successful performance. And I think there's a lot of people that if you look at some of the athletes over the years, they'll say, I couldn't sleep the night before the big match. And I went out there and dominated. Because again, it's one of those things that stacks up. It's like a debt over time.
So what did your testing actually show that led you there? And like, what was the moment you stopped kind of like trusting the conventional wisdom?
Yeah. So again, it comes back to our, like, we collect everything. So it's always someone posing an idea in the gym. And so one of my athletes actually said, he said, I wonder what, it was the same guy that like, he had his personal record that day. Said, I wonder what the effects are of like the whoop. He had a whoop. I wonder what the effects are of the whoop against like, did somebody have a successful day? I thought it was a really interesting question. So we got a whoop API. We got a bunch of people in our gym that opted into this study, if you will. We pulled their data for like 8 months, and from February to December. So yeah, about 8 months. And they were training in the gym. And then we cross-referenced their data, like their Whoop data, against their in-gym performance. And we found that, again, like the people that slept more over those 8 months, they put on more muscle mass. They had a higher increase in performance over those 8 months. But from like a short term, like a weekly period, there really was no difference. And by no difference, I don't mean like it was like 0.48, 0.53, and the t-test failed. I mean, it was like 0.53, 0.53. It was essentially equal. And so, yeah, it showed us again, like aggregate gains are extremely important, but in the short term, it does not rob you of your ability to compete.
So you guys raised some capital, right, in 2020 as a loan. You paid it back, and then you've given essentially like zero equity in 5 years. So what did operating under that kind of constraint force you to learn that, maybe funded founders never really have to go through?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like, again, luck is important. And like people love telling the story. I mean, I'm a Canadian that now lives in America, and so people love the American dream and working hard. And I think all those things are true. But I mean, it was 2020, so the rates were a lot better than they are today in America. And so, but what it basically it showed us was like, how efficient can we be? It's not about like running, like taking the money and immediately running and saying, okay, we need labor. We need to go get the best sales guy we can. We came from a Y Combinator company. We need to go get this account executive. We need to go get. We need to go to market right away. We took the money and we said, okay, let's go back to the original vision, which is how are we going to solve this problem? And for us, it became evidently clear the more we talked about it that this was a data problem. And a data problem doesn't require a go-to-market team in the next 2 years. A data problem requires data collection. So we spent probably all the money on data collection. How can we create a frictionless data experience that people want to come in, that people want to test, people want to voluntarily give us their data? And then how can we like synthesize it in such a way that it gets tagged very quickly, entered super quickly? We know where everything is. We're not losing data. We're not reliant on a ton of external systems, things like that. So honestly, like how do we keep the 128,000? How do we parlay it essentially into a much bigger company? We didn't hire a bunch of people that we didn't need. We stayed very small with our workforce of like 3, 4 people, and then only after we were able to like basically have a data set that we very much believed in, that we started saying, okay, now let's fill in specific blanks, right? Like what that means is, okay, now we have something that we're offering to the public. I think we need to say, we sold 30, let's call them memberships. We sold 30 memberships last week. I think we could sold 50 if we had a sales guy doing it full time. Okay, let's go get a sales guy. So now you're kind of filling in the blanks of a company instead of like mass hiring and then saying, okay, well, this guy didn't do a good job, that guy didn't do a good job. You just take what you need one step at a time. I think it avoids waste that way. And whether or not that's because it was a loan or because that's just the way we think as engineers, I'm not sure. But I think that's why that 128,000 was able to be A, converted into something bigger, and B, paid back on time without giving up any equity.
But just to switch gears, I guess, to this kind of last part, right? So can you give people the plain language version? Like, well, what does Liquid Sports Lab do, and who is essentially on the other side of it?
Yeah, Liquid Sports Lab brings clients in every single day and ensures they get to their full potential. That's all it is from an athletic standpoint. And how we know that is by bringing a client in, measuring everything about them, and seeing how, like, let's say you want to throw 95 miles an hour. Let's say that's the goal. Let's just set that as the goal. And you throw 91 miles an hour. What do you do that 95 mile per hour throwers don't do? We know because we have the data. We have 195 mile per hour throwers in the gym. We know what they do, what they profile as an image in space. We know where their arm is when they let go of the ball, how fast they rotate into that ball release, things like that. So we're just basically seeing like what is the lowest hanging fruit, keeping you from being who you want to be. That's essentially what we are. And then to your second point, I want to remember that. Was it how or?
No, I think that kind of like explain like what does Liquid Sports, like what do you guys do, and who's essentially on the other side, but it's essentially athletes. You said hockey players now as well you're bringing on.
Yeah, and so the consumer, like who is the perfect consumer for us, is a person that's had like a good amount of success, or has worked super hard and does it and wants to get to some level of that next level. So whether it's like a hockey player that wants to go play professionally, or a baseball player that's been stuck in the minor leagues that wants to break through and set himself up for success and somehow get to the major leagues, or a high school player that wants to play in college that maybe isn't good enough to play in college, isn't getting the offers that he or she wants. That's our consumer. It's like,
How do you find them, or how do they find you?
so we're based here in Rochester, New York. The nice part is we have a pretty good organic following in the upstate New York area. How they find us, we got to do a better job of marketing. That's something that we don't do well as engineers. We don't think about. And now in terms of bringing it back to the point of like, when is the right time to go hire more people? Now we're in the process of obviously raising funds, going to hire more people, saying, hey, we're going to partner up with more gyms, more academies, things like that, and bring this technology to the masses.
Oh, interesting. That's super cool. You describe it as like athlete health AI, right? So what's the model actually predicting, and like what does an athlete or a coach do differently because of it?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the model sets a baseline, and so it tells you where you rank against. So the athlete will input a goal, right, and it'll show you where you rank versus that goal. We make our models very easy to read, and what that means, like you don't need to have an engineering degree to kind of know what our model does. We grade everything on a scalar. So we call it the plus model. What that means is like 100 is average, right? So if you set your goal to like, oh, I want to throw 100 miles an hour, and you get a 91, that means you're 9% below average. And so that is what it tells our consumer from a performance standpoint. Then from an injury standpoint, there are two types of injuries. There are acute injuries and chronic injuries. Acute injuries are extremely hard to prevent. They're just like I landed funny and my bone gave. I threw a ball and my arm snapped. But most injuries are not acute injuries. 90% of injuries are chronic injuries. They're bicep tendonitis that migrates into a different area. Like a runner's knee, like patellar tendonitis from running too much. And so there is the beauty of that is there's always some kind of depreciation before the system breaks. And so what our app, our technology, our models do is they find that depreciation and they flag it and they say, hey, you are at risk for developing whatever the model flags you as developing. And they're the injuries that nag you for years. So they can be fixed and found. And how does the model know that, right? That's always a big question. Well, because we've seen so many athletes at this point, because we spent 5 years collecting data, we've seen an athlete that has the exact same characteristics that you do, made the same decisions that you make, and fell trapped to, let's say, patellar tendonitis for runners. So the model is able to say, hey, you're at risk for this, and this is how you decrease that risk.
You mentioned that's really interesting. So you mentioned earlier, Roy, that you guys are raising a Series A now after essentially 5 years of owning the whole thing, right? So what does that capital unlock that patients alone can't?
Yeah, and so right now we have all this data. We have to go to market with it. This is now a problem that people are funding, but B, very cognizant of. So Y Combinator every year they put out their request for startups. Their recent one came out last week or 2 weeks ago. And if you look at their number one request for startup this year, which is funny that it only happened this year because we've been doing this for a while, it is personalized AI medicine. Something that people can continuously look at to see, am I getting better? Am I getting worse? Am I at risk for anything? And so in terms of why now, it just like the market dynamics very much tell us there are a lot of people bought into what we're doing that are trying to start to collect the data, but we already have it. So that's 1 and 2. And 3 is like we have a product now that we can put in front of people that we're proud of and we know is going to be right in the grand scheme of things. And that was always the biggest concern is with personalized medicine, these are people's lives and careers you're talking about. If you do not have enough data to ensure that you are correct in certain areas, it's not. I would argue it's unethical to go to market because what you don't want to do is monger fear. You don't want to say, oh well, our model's not developed enough to actually predict this, but we're going to say it anyway. And this is someone's life you're dealing with. This isn't another B2B SaaS that is automating your taxes. This is like someone's passion, their life, their career, depending on what level they perform the sport. And so for those combinations of reasons, it's just 2026 has been kind to our field and everyone's looking to build something like this. B, we're very much confident that we did things the right way and collected more than enough data. And C, again, part of that confidence is, hey, are we sure this is all encompassing? And we're absolutely sure. We've done basically 2 years of QA at this point to make sure that what we're shipping is not only representative of the athlete population, but almost over-representative. And I don't mean like an overfitting way. I mean in like we could have done this a year ago had we really wanted to, but we just wanted to be sure.
And help me land the plane with this one, Roy. So I guess where does this go next? Like, is it deeper into pro sport, wider into youth development, or across into healthcare and rehab?
Yeah, primarily it's going to go towards youth development, and the reason is the big trend we're seeing, and again, as guys that always follow the data, the big trend we're seeing in professional athletes is that they're survivors. And people might say, like, what does that mean? Professional athletes have been systematically abused at each level of the system they played at. And let me explain before that becomes something weird. Is because if you're in the MLB, there's this funnel, right? You played Little League baseball, you were the best. You went to middle school baseball, you were the best. You went to high school baseball, you were the best. And you went to college baseball, you were the best. You were drafted, meaning that you were really good in college baseball. You made your way through the minor leagues where you were the best at each level, and then you made your professional debut. At every single level, you have been the best, meaning you always pitch on short rest. I'm just using a pitcher example, but you always play on short rest, meaning when that team had to win the championship, instead of resting you properly, they were like, listen, it's just one game. It's just one game. Go out there, do your best. But you did that at every single level you played at because you were the best. So by time you get to professional sports, you're already damaged goods. That's just what we've seen in the data, because you have been systematically, that's the correct word here, because it is a system that you have to work through on the way up. You have been systematically abused at each level because of your ability. That high school coach just had to win one more game for him to become a college coach. So he put you out there on short rest. That college coach just need to win one more game for him to be a pro coach. So he put you out there on short rest. And because you were the best, you were always put in these situations on inadequate rest, on inadequate like ability to recuperate, however you want to frame it, from a last function, to be able to go out there and win that last game. And over all this time, you accrued a lot more stress than somebody else who just wasn't that good, because he wasn't that good, so they weren't trotting him out there. And so to make this change, it has to start at the youth level. And that's why I think this directly injects into the youth level with all these new academies and gyms and all these things, with kids specializing earlier and earlier. I think that's where it can make the most change. But ultimately, we'll follow the data. If there's more application in other areas, that's what we'll pivot to next.
Awesome, Roy. Well, it's a lot of fun, man. I learned a lot. I have quite a few people listening. Thank you all for tuning in. Roy, where do people learn more about you and the company? Are you on LinkedIn, or you want to maybe share the website as well?
Yeah, LinkedIn. You can look up Liquid. You can look up me, Roy Krishnan. You can look up Liquid Sports Lab. LiquidSportsLab.com should have a little, like, just everything. So to go find us, to go follow us. If you guys want to see what the data process looks like. The collection's always really fun. Our socials are always at Liquid Sports Lab, and we put out a ton of fun stuff so people can see the professionals come in, get their data collected, and what it looks like in real time.
Awesome. It's so fascinating to learn about, humans kind of pushing their potential, like you said, now year after year after year. And then, yeah, it's just so cool, right? Like people coming to you going like, how do I pitch like 1 mile an hour faster or whatever? That's crazy. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Roy. Thank you once again, everyone, for tuning in. And yeah, I guess until next time, Roy, hang out for 1 minute. I'm going to bring the stream to an end.
All right.